All right, so today we're talking about Nebula. Nebula is our cloud managed networking solution. Specifically, we refer to it as the first full stack cloud networking solution for SMB. So we weren't the first guys out here to have a full stack cloud networking solution. That was probably Meraki back in the day, but Meraki was aimed at the enterprise space, as were a lot of the first cloud-based solutions. So we saw what was going on there and saw the potential that this could really benefit SMBs when it comes to managing their networks as well. So we created Nebula. It launched all the way back in 2016. So again, we are the first that we're targeting the SMB space with a full stack solution. Full stack meaning that it wasn't just for one type of product. It wasn't just AP management or switch management or gateway management. It was for all of them. We currently can manage over 100 different products out there. And we'll just go through here. So basically the idea behind Nebula is to give you a single place where you can go to, where you can find all of your customers, all of their sites, and all of their Nebula compatible hardware to manage it all through that one interface. You simply go to nebula.zyxel.com, log in, and everything is right there for you. So all your configuration is done through the cloud through a web browser. The cloud itself is hosted by Amazon AWS, so a very reliable hosted platform. There's nothing you need to set up. We take care of all of that for you. In order to use Nebula, you simply need to buy Nebula compatible hardware. You don't have to run or install any special software on the local network or set up your own server. You don't need a cloud key or a CNA type device to communicate with the cloud. The agent is built into the hardware itself. Nebula, for most of our products, is purely plug and play self-provisioning. You simply plug it in, turn it on, and if you've set it up to be managed in the, or if you want to manage it in the cloud, you simply go into the cloud, add the device to your cloud, and it will automatically put itself into cloud mode for you. So Nebula consists of a bunch of stuff. So here at the bottom, we've got all of our different types of hardware here for you: access points, switches, UTM firewalls, our 4G router, our new lightweight SCR50AXE security gateway appliances. So that's your hardware. And then on the software side of things, there's the Nebula Control Center. So that is the cloud portion. So I'm just reading a question here. Okay, so I'll get to the question after I finish the slide. So then there's the Nebula Control Center, or you'll see it often abbreviated as NCC. So that's the cloud portion of Nebula. Again, we're running that on AWS servers. And you simply log in, and that's where everything is there for you. We do also have a mobile app that's designed just for phones. It does not run on tablets. We do have a tablet optimized version of our web page that will automatically be loaded in. So if you're using a tablet to manage Nebula, you just go to the website. If you're using your phone, you can use our mobile app. Now, the mobile app is primarily aimed at installers, so it makes it really easy to scan in and add Nebula devices to your existing customers and networks. There's some basic configuration things in there, but for the most part, you're just using that to for new installs, for checking status at a glance of what's going on your customers' networks, things like that, not for doing the management. For the management, you'll want to use the web browser interface. So now on to the question here: is the Nebula portal different for an MSP? Will an MSP have a single pane of glass to manage all clients and client assets? Lastly, can clients have access to their own Nebula account underneath the MSP? So we'll talk about some of that in the future, but I'll just go ahead and answer that now. So yeah, you would still use the same interface if you're an MSP for Nebula. It's the exact same interface. You'd still have all your clients, all their sites, all done through the single Nebula pane of glass. We do offer some optional licenses which unlock additional features that are primarily aimed at that MSP space. So if you're an MSP, you may want to upgrade from the free version of Nebula to add some of these licenses on there to unlock some additional features for you. And as it comes to user management, so yes, you can give your customers access to the Nebula cloud. We have some granular controls there, so you can choose whether you want them to have full access read-only access, or access only to specific sites inside Nebula. We've also got some specific types of roles that you can assign to people. We've got an installer role. If you're providing hotspot access, we have a role that's just for, say, a receptionist to generate new user accounts for guest access, things like that. Back to the presentation. So this is just showing here on this next slide the things that go into, putting together your typical brand new network installation, right? You buy the equipment, you install the equipment, you figure out how you're going to monitor that equipment, how are you going to get remote access to the equipment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea behind Nebula here is to take what goes into setting up a new network and is designed to reduce the things you have to buy and reduce how much configuration you have to do. So setting up and installing the equipment is generally a lot easier since it's plug and play, and we'll get a little bit more into some of the things that make it quicker, but you don't have to do any on-site configuration. The cloud provides your easy remote access. You don't have to worry about setting up VPNs. We can store logs in the cloud automatically for you. The cloud can provide your monitoring platform, etc. So in general, should save you money, should save you some time. So Nebula itself is free. The free version of Nebula allows you to manage an unlimited number of customers, an unlimited number of sites, and an unlimited number of devices. But we do have these optional licenses that are available for you. So we have what's called Nebula Plus Pack and Nebula Pro Pack. So those unlock additional features in the cloud, and we will go more in depth into them. But if you want to use Plus or Pro Pack, you have to buy a license for each device in your customer's organization. So once all devices have the license applied, then it unlocks additional features for you. And then we have the Nebula MSP license here. So this is a license that you would apply to an admin account, and it unlocks additional features for that admin account across all organizations that you might be managing or have access to with that admin account. And again, as we go further into things here, I will break these down into a little bit more detail for you. So setting up a network in Nebula is pretty simple and straightforward. At any point here, you can log into Nebula and start setting up your customer. You'll set them up as what we call an organization. So you'll have an organization for each of your customers, and then you will put the sites for your customers underneath those organizations. You simply scan the QR code that's located either on the hardware itself or on the box and assign it to your customer and to their site. Connect it so it has power and an internet connection, and from that point on, you've got full management control of those devices. So some of the benefits here of Nebula is up and running in minutes. As we say, we do self-provisioning here for you. We have some very basic wizards when you first are setting up a site that will configure some of your basic settings for you to get you up and going. You can start configuring pretty much at any time. You don't need to actually go into the hardware itself. So a lot of your basic settings you can configure before you've assigned any devices to the site. Once you've assigned some devices to your site, it will unlock the additional settings. So you can be configuring that while you're waiting for the hardware to be shipped from your office to the customer's site via UPS. So when it arrives there, all you have to do is plug it in and it's ready to go. Now I'll start going through some slides here talking about some of the features found in Nebula. On some of these slides, you will see a little button next to the bullet point that says Plus or Pro, and that's telling you that in order to have access to that feature, you do need the optional Plus or Pro license, depending on which button is there. If it's got both buttons, it means that feature is available in both versions. So free version of Nebula here, or all versions of Nebula, you have unified central control and visibility, zero-touch provisioning, built-in default multi-site management. Again, we've got that zero-touch provisioning. So the agent itself is built into all of our hardware. So you simply plug it in. It will check with the cloud to see if you've decided to designate it for cloud management. And if so, it will automatically put itself into cloud mode, download the configuration, and update its firmware. Here is the main Nebula interface. This is the dashboard you see when you choose one of your customer sites. All of these widgets here in the middle of the screen are customizable, so you can choose which widgets you are shown based on what you're interested in. There's a little customize button over here and you can choose, but you can see in this example here, we can show whether the internet connection is up, what devices are currently online. Do you have many mobile routers, firewalls, switches, etc.? How many may be offline? How many users are currently on your wireless network, how much bandwidth they're using. If you're using one of our security gateways, we can break down network traffic by individual application as well as user for you. Up here at the top, we've got two pull down menus. One is a list of your customers. So you'll pull that down, choose which customer you're interested in, and then it will populate the second pull down with their sites. And you just simply choose the site you want to manage and you'll jump over to it. So it makes it really quick and easy to jump between customers or jump between sites on a customer. And then configuration and monitoring is done with this menu on the left-hand side of the page here. So when you configure your SSID, by default, it will go ahead and automatically push those settings to all access points on the network. We do have the ability using tagging to specify certain SSID settings are specific to specific APs on the network, but by default, it will automatically push out settings for captive portal, SSID, VLAN, channel usage, etc., as a default across all of your APs. We support what's called Smart Guest. It's simply a little button you turn on and say, hey, this SSID is for guest access, and it will automatically put them on a different VLAN, enable layer 2 isolation, and some other settings to make it easy to provide guest access. And if you add APs at a future date, they'll automatically download their configuration from there. On the switch side of things here, we have the ability to go in and choose multiple ports and configure all of those ports at the same time. You don't have to do it port by port basis. We have the features you expect to find here. PoE scheduling control is there for you. We have real-time and historical LAN monitoring, so you can see what's going on your network. Visually here, you can see the little charts there. And then some of the optional features that get unlocked with our Pro and Plus license include advanced IGMP settings, specifically aimed at those of you that are deploying IPTV on your network to give you some access to additional reports and information and settings that are generally IPTV focused. We have the ability to set up port-based bandwidth control, static routes. We can set up using Plus or Pro. We can go ahead and set up automatic VLAN designations based on the MAC address of the device that's plugged in. So basically every device has a unique MAC address, and each vendor, generally I believe it's the first 6 digits of the MAC is unique to them, to that vendor. So if you know that you're using a certain vendor of IP phone, you can just put in those first parts of the MAC address, and any device that matches those MAC addresses will automatically be put on the VLAN for your VoIP phones, for instance. And we also have what's called IP source guard to make sure that somebody hasn't plugged in their own DHCP server onto the network. And then if you have our GS1350 series switches, those are our specially designed security switches. It unlocks some of the additional features in there, such as monitoring and automatic rebooting of devices that are connected to those switches. And our mobile app here, if you have the Plus or the Pro pack, you will get access to push notifications and email alerts, particularly when devices go offline. So you can set your own settings there. So if a device hasn't talked to the cloud for a certain period of time, you can go ahead and get a push notification that, hey, your customer at this site, this device has gone offline. Maybe something's been wrong there. You should take a look at it. So with the Pro Pack version of Nebula here, okay, so Keith here is asking here, you mentioned that using Nebula with APs, you can specify a guest SSID, which will automatically put it on a separate VLAN. I assume this requires a Zyxel firewall router to be present on the network. No, it doesn't. So we also, in addition, we will put it on its own VLAN. So you would need to configure that VLAN. That's something that you would specify. But if you don't have VLANs, if you don't have VLAN-aware switches, or a gateway, or you're using some other vendor's gateway, we also have functionality that's automatically turned on called layer 2 isolation. And with layer 2 isolation, you specify the MAC address for your gateway, and we will only allow clients to send data or to send packets to that MAC address to get out onto the internet. You can unlock some additional MAC addresses too. So if you've got, a shared server you want guests to be able to, for instance, copy PowerPoint presentations to, you can whitelist those as well. But basically any other device on your network, those guests are not able to send traffic to it, essentially isolating them from your local network. Continuing on here, with the Pro Pack here, we have a year's worth of logs that are kept for you, and that includes a configuration log. We will go ahead and record every configuration change made. So that way, if you're troubleshooting things down the road, you can log in and see, well, did somebody recently change something that might be causing that? So it's a great, just little troubleshooting tool there for you that comes with the Pro Pack. We have what's called misconfiguration protection that works with all versions of Nebula. And basically, it's just when you're changing IP or VLAN settings, we'll make sure that those are applied across your network in the proper order, that no device accidentally gets disconnected and isolated. I'm sure if you've messed particularly with VLANs, I think all of us at some point have probably, screwed up the order in which we're configuring those VLANs and lost access to one of our devices. So this is just a way to make sure you don't have to go on site and reset a piece of hardware due to a configuration mischange. Continuing on with Keith's question here. So a basic AT&T modem router would work with the APs that are supporting a guest SSID. Yeah, so on that case, that probably doesn't work with VLAN, but that layer 2 isolation will still keep them off the rest of the network. It should work fine. Back to the slide here, we have the ability to schedule firmware updates. All versions of Nebula have this ability. So you can go in based on your customer and decide when to go at what times you want us to automatically push out firmware updates to your devices. Now, if you do have the Pro version of Nebula, we give you even more options and settings. You can set up per device rules. You can set rules per device. Where with the free version of Nebula, it's a little bit more generic. It's more like this site, this is the time we want them to do updates, or we don't want them to do updates right now at all, etc. So some of the other things here is we have a map and floor plan. This is part of the regular version of Nebula. So we have Google Maps integration, or you can import in a floor plan. So it allows you to put, say, your sites on the Google map to give you a visual representation of where each site may be. And then once you drill down into the site, you can load in that floor plan and you can drag and drop your hardware to where it's installed. So if you have to send a rep on site to do something, it makes it easier for them to find where that equipment is or where they should be looking in the building for the equipment they need to service. If you have the Plus or Pro version of Nebula, we have an automatic topology view where we'll automatically detect the devices that are plugged into your network and then sort of illustrate what is connected to what. Again, it's another tool to help you when it comes to troubleshooting. If something's gone offline or you're having packet loss, you may not remember which switch, you've plugged in that particular AP to, et cetera. So that allows you to quickly see, the full path from the device to the router to see where the problems might be. And we've got a number of live tools in there, the ability to, do pings and trace routes and stuff from your devices in the Nebula cloud to be able to help troubleshoot things. So with the Plus and Pro pack of Nebula here, we have the ability to run reports and set those reports up to automatically be emailed out. So you can set it up to send you weekly or monthly reports on what's going on with that network. It's also something you can use to communicate to your customers. You can send them, set it up to automatically send them reports, and you can go ahead and add your logo to those reports so that you're branded with your company's information. It's particularly good for those of you that are deploying our firewall products and UTM services. So you can show them all the stuff that's going on with those UTM licenses, what sort of attacks have been blocked, what sort of intrusions have been blocked, what the content filtering has been up to. So you can show them the value, because that's one of the challenges we often run into here, because it's the gateway blocking things. The end user has no idea what's going on and what they've been protected from. So these reports can be a way to tell them, hey, look, this is what we've been protecting you from. This is why you want to renew services next year. Yeah, so Keith, we'll go back to Keith's question here. So he's asking for what's the difference between layer 2 isolation and VLANs. So VLANs is a specific protocol that needs to be supported by all the devices along the line. Basically, you add a little bit to the packets that are being sent that identify the VLAN they're on. And then each device along the way is supposed to look at that packet, see which VLANs it's on, and then decide which ports or which routes it's allowed to route that traffic on based on that VLAN. The challenge you run into with VLANs is in order to use VLANs, essentially every device on the network needs to support it. So it doesn't do you any good if your AP is putting a VLAN tag on something if your switch doesn't support VLANs or your gateway doesn't support VLANs. So with layer 2 isolation, instead of relying on the network infrastructure to enforce VLAN tags, the access point itself is determining which packets to allow out of the access point. So basically with layer 2 isolation, you give it a whitelist of MAC addresses, and then wireless devices are only able to directly address those devices which are on that whitelist. So it essentially separates them, because if you try to access anything else, the access point drops the packet automatically. So it's a way of providing that guest isolation on a network where you don't have VLAN support. VLAN would be better, but that's often not the case, especially at smaller offices and businesses. So layer 2 isolation is a good proxy for that and can provide you much of that same protection, but without needing it. Continuing on here, some more tools here for you. These are all pro tools. So we have the ability to synchronize settings between sites on different organizations, or excuse me, to different sites under the same organization. So if you've got a customer or they're a franchise, they've got dozens of locations. With the Pro Pack, it's really easy to clone your settings from one site and convert those over to a new site as you expand the network out to new locations or onboard additional locations where most of the settings are going to be the same. We have the ability to clone switch settings and then again move them to different devices under that same organization. The ability to back up and restore switch settings. So as you experiment with things, if you find you've borked things, you can easily roll back to a previous switch configuration and continue on forward. And the ability to use what we call a configuration template. So it's a template with certain settings that you can push out, and it will override any settings across all of your sites on it. So in addition to that, we have that MSP license I was talking about earlier. So it unlocks some additional MSP type settings. The first and main one here that you're going to get is it gives you a view called the MSP View, which gives you a quick sort of summary view of all of the customers that you are currently managing and gives you sort of a snapshot view, which customers are on the free version of Nebula, which customers are using Plus or Pro Pack, letting you know if any license renewals are coming up soon or any of your organizations have recently fallen out of licensing and may need a renewal. So it's a handy tool for you. You can then quickly see what's going on at each of the individual sites under your customers, what the health of their network is. It allows you to rebrand the Zyxel Nebula interface and remove the Zyxel logos from it and put in your company's logos. So if you're giving your end users or your IT guys at those places access to the Nebula interface, it's again just a way to sort of remind them that you're the guy that's providing a lot of these services for them. You're the one to contact there. In fact, we can change the support contact information to be your company's support contact information. Another really handy tool if you're an MSP is the ability to set up teams for your admin accounts. So instead of needing to go through, you onboard a new admin, you've got 20 different customers to manage. He's going to be managing 5 of those. So instead of having to go into each of those 5 customers and assign him as an admin, you can simply assign him to a team with other admins and then assign that team to those sites. So as you can just simply add and remove users from the team, and it will automatically add and remove those customers from the sites that those teams are assigned to. So it's just a little quicker, administrative work there for you to make it simplify things and smooth things out for you. We also have the ability to synchronize certain settings between different customers of yours. So if you've got, different customers, but you've got some, default settings that you like to use regardless of who your customer is, this is a way to quickly clone a lot of those settings between your different customers that you're managing. Another nice feature of the MSP license is it gives you those email and push alerts for all customers you're managing, not just those that are using the Plus or Pro pack. So even those customers that may be using the free version of Nebula, you'll still be able to get those push alerts for them. So this is a more in-depth now. We'll go through the sort of the different versions of Nebula here and talk about some of the differences and what's the same between them. So again, all of them here give you an unlimited number of devices, customers, and sites to be able to manage through the Nebula interface. All versions give you that zero-touch auto deployment. All versions give you over-the-air cloud-based firmware management, including scheduling. All versions give you access to our mobile apps. Now, one of the areas here where you're going to first start seeing some differences is when it comes to the logs. So the free version of Nebula only stores 24 hours worth of logs in the cloud. Plus Pack gives you 7 days worth of logs in the cloud. Pro Pack stores a year's worth of logs in the cloud. Now, having said that, we do support your standard syslog server export. So you can always set up your own syslog and store your own logs above and beyond what you may get with the free or the plus version of Nebula. Another area where there are some differences here is the number of admin accounts that can be assigned to an organization. So again, an organization in our terminology is basically your customer. So free version of Nebula, you can have 5 admin accounts per customer. Plus Pack gives you up to 8, and then Pro Pack, it's an unlimited number of admin accounts. Another area here where we've got some differences, we have our own cloud-hosted authentication server. So this can replace a Radius server if you don't want to set up your own Radius server. It's also the database that's used for any sort of MAC filtering. So the free version of Nebula gives you 50 entries into that database. Plus Pack gets you 100 entries into that database, and then Pro Pack gives you an unlimited number of entries into that database. And again, we still do support Radius authentication. So if you want to, use your own Radius server for authentication, you don't have to worry about this. So all versions of Nebula give you access to the core configuration options in your devices, whether we're talking switches, access points, or firewalls. All of your core functionality is available to you in the free version of Nebula. We give you MAC filtering and 802.1x authentication across all versions of Nebula, and all versions of Nebula have captive portal built in, including various authentication methods that you can use to control access to it. Now, the one other difference you'll see here, this one is missing here on the base pack, is when it comes to the log storage. If you do not log into your customer's organization at least once every 30 days, we will stop collecting logs until you log in again and re-enable it. So if you haven't logged into your customer for 3 or 4 months when you first log in, there will be a little notification on the screen that basically says, hey, do you want to start gathering logs again? You click yes, and away you go. So going forward here, these next features require the Plus or Pro license. They are not available in the free version of Nebula. Advanced firmware scheduling, we talked about that earlier today, earlier in the presentation. Advanced reporting features, we've talked about that already. That automatic network topology view, we've talked about that earlier. Email alerts and notifications, we talked about that earlier. Wi-Fi vouchers. So Wi-Fi vouchers are for somebody who wants to charge for guest access. So it's sort of like for maybe a cafe or a small hotel. So you do need the Plus or Pro version if you want to generate and create time-limited vouchers that you can hand out to people to get onto the guest network. So some of those advanced features we talked about earlier on the switches, advanced IGMP settings, port-based, I think, VLAN, or port-based bandwidth controls, the ability to automatically reboot devices when they become non-responsive, et cetera. So that requires Plus or Pro. Pro Packs required for the audit log that we talked about earlier. Pro Packs required for the configuration, sync, clones, and templates that we talked about earlier. The ability to back up and restore switch settings that we talked about earlier. ProPack also gives you access to command line interface for compatible devices. I think that's just the switches and maybe the gateways at the moment. So instead of having to SSH into your device, you can log into Nebula. We'll open up a terminal window and you'll give you CLI access through the web interface. And then the ProPack also allows you to open a ticket directly with our headquarters. through the Nebula interface instead of having to call in and open a ticket over the phone or by email locally here in the US. ProPack also gives you access to our API system if you want to do integration with external equipment. It gives you access to our advanced Wi-Fi client monitoring and our ability to use artificial intelligence to be able to automatically change settings for you. It gives you access to advanced AAA features for those of you doing more advanced captive portal implementations. Gives you access to more advanced Wi-Fi settings. So you can change, for instance, the RSSID threshold on a per AP basis, the ability to export NAT off of an AP. So we have the ability on our access points, most of them, to have the access point itself provide NAT functionality on a per SSID basis. So with ProPack, you can export the logs from that. And we also have something called programmable SSID, which allows you to basically algorithmically assign SSID names based on the device itself. So if you're doing a hotel and you've got an AP in each room, you can set up a rule to automatically basically give each room its own unique SSID. That requires the ProPack. Access to static routing on the switches, some of those, security switch features, those all require a ProPack, etc. So it's kind of boring there. We do have this available. You can reach out to your salesperson. They can send you a copy of this. I think you can just look. I think if you just Google Zyxel NCC license subscriptions, I think we've got this publicly available. You can just download it that way as well. So we've already talked about the MSP license here. So just again, I just wanted to reiterate that this is on a per admin account basis. So you buy the license, you assign it to the admin. That admin has access to these features. Other admins will not have access to those features unless you add a license to them as well. So generally what happens is you've got one main guy and you give it to him. And then the rest of your techs probably don't need access to those features, so you don't give them the license. So when it comes to Nebula, you say, hey, Sean, your presentation's been horrible, but I sound kind of, it does sound though kind of interesting. What do I need to buy to be able to use it? So when you're looking to use Nebula compatible hardware, you're looking for what we call Nebula Flex. So basically, when we first started off doing the cloud, we copied the Cisco Meraki route. We had a set of hardware that worked traditionally, and we had a set of hardware for the cloud. And that just didn't work for the SMB space. So instead, we got rid of that. We've moved to what we call Nebula Flex, where basically we've got one set of hardware that you can manage the traditional way, or offers a cloud mode so you can manage it in the cloud. So you can standardize on one set of hardware and you can choose based on customer what way you're going to manage it. So that's what we call Nebula Flex. We give you the flexibility to manage it in the cloud or not. So it gives you flexibility, right, based on your customer's deployment, your customer's needs, how you want to use it. Again, the cloud is free. The core features of our Nebula Cloud are free for you. And one of the nice things about it is our cloud system automatically scales for you. So as you add more customers, you add more sites, you add more devices, there's nothing special you need to do on the management side of things. We'll automatically expand and cover that all for you. You don't have to worry about upgrading servers, buying additional hardware, etc. We also offer what's called Nebula Flex Pro. So Nebula Flex Pro is the same thing as Nebula Flex. You can manage it the traditional way, or you have the option of managing it in the cloud. Now, with Nebula Flex Pro, what happens is you're also getting 1 year of our Nebula ProPack license bundled with the device. So if you're planning to use Nebula ProPack, it may make sense to just go ahead and buy it as a bundled license with it. Now, in the case of our access points, there's also a third mode that requires Nebula Flex Pro. And that is our security gateways, or USG Flex, or ATP series. They have a local wireless LAN controller built into them. So if you want to provide local controller management of your APs, you want to buy APs that are Nebula Flex Pro, even if you're not using the cloud. So this is a good question here. This is coming from Kenneth. Can you take a configuration of a non-Nebula switch and import it into a Nebula switch? So, and we'll expand that out just a little bit. So basically, standalone mode and cloud mode are independent of each other. The configurations are completely separate, and that's because some of the features are different between the different modes, in particular on our security gateway products. But because of that, the configurations don't carry over. So if you put it into cloud mode, it's going to overwrite what's there with what you've configured in the cloud. If you then decide later on you want to move it to a standalone mode, it will lose its cloud configuration and you will need to locally set up that config. And there is currently no way to take a standalone config and upload it to the cloud and have it converted for you. That is something I know we are looking at on the security appliances or some other workarounds on the security appliances. We're going to have a mode in the future, which is a non-Nebula mode. But giving you access to the local web interface on a gateway through the Nebula cloud, rather than moving the device entirely into the cloud. So, once that comes out on the security gateways, maybe we'll see something like that propagated out to the other devices. But that is something that is coming as far as that goes. But yeah, for the moment, 2 separate modes, 2 separate configurations. So just real quick here, everything on the top here is Nebula Flex. Everything on the bottom is Nebula Flex Pro. So Nebula Flex APs are our sort of Soho consumer APs, the 50 and 90 series. And then basically everything that's NWA and starts with a 1 or 2. So NWA 110, NWA 1123, NWA 220, etc. On the switches, it is our 1950, 1920, and 1930 series. So those are all Nebula Flex. And then we've got our new SCR50AXE. Those are Nebula Flex. And if you buy one of our USG Flex devices that does not come bundled with UTM services, that's Nebula Flex. Going up to the Pro version here, that's basically all of our APs that start with WAX or WAC. Those are Nebula Flex Pro. On the switches, it's our 1350 series, 2220 series, and 3800 series. Those are all Nebula Flex Pro. And then all of our ATP series come out of the box as Nebula Flex Pro, and the USG Flex bundled series, those that are bundled with the UTM licenses, also include a bundled Pro pack. So those are Nebula Flex Pro. And then we do have a 4G LTE outdoor router. So that one is also Nebula Flex Pro. So a common question we run into when it comes to Nebula is about privacy. A lot of people are scared of the cloud, because obviously you're trusting us to manage that for you, and they're worried that their private data or their customers' private data is somehow going to get compromised because of our cloud. So just one thing I want to just talk about here is how we handle things here. So again, the cloud instance is handled by us, but it's hosted by Amazon AWS. It's distributed in different regions, and some of that also has to do with legal requirements. So for instance, in Germany, for instance, you can't have a hosted US solution. We have to have the services hosted in the EU, possibly even in Germany itself. I'm not sure on that. But because of that, we do have different services in different parts of the world based on what the local laws require. But in general, AWS is one of the most secure and most reliable cloud hosting platforms out there. So there's no bottlenecks, there's no throughput issues for you. We automatically scale as your deployments scale for you. But when it comes to that privacy thing I was talking about, what's important here is your customers' traffic doesn't touch our cloud. The only thing that touches the cloud is the management traffic, the configuration updates, the log information. Those are the only things that are being passed between the cloud and the local devices. Traffic that's intended for the LAN stays on your customer's LAN. Traffic that's intended to go out onto the internet goes directly out onto the internet. It does not get routed through our cloud first. Something that I have seen some solutions that do it that way for some strange reason. So just letting you know, we are secure there. The protocol we use to handle the communication between our devices and the cloud is not something that we've cooked up ourselves in-house and you just have to trust us on. We are using what's called NetConf, NETCONF, short for Network Configuration Protocol. So it's an industry standard that's out there that we use and comply with. It's not something secret that we've made ourselves and you just have to hope works. So just this is sort of like our last slide here. So just to hit on the key points and takeaways here. Nebula is simple. It's easy to set up. It's easy to control your networks. It's easy to get things up and running. It's efficient. You don't have to buy as much stuff. You don't have to take as much time configuring and setting things up. We make it super reliable. Another question we get is what happens if AWS does go down, or what happens if my customer's fiber connection gets cut? So our Nebula hardware will continue to work with the existing configuration. I know from talking to some other people that certain other cloud hosted solutions, will start to fail after a certain number of hours or days. Everything on ours will continue to run. Obviously, we can't give you status updates through the cloud or get logs, but the hardware itself will continue to run using the last known configuration it had while you wait for that internet connection to get back online or the cloud to come back up. And it's affordable, it's cheap. Our licenses, retail for 1 year of Nebula Pro is like $35, I think, per device. So when you compare it to other vendor solutions out there, it's significantly cheaper than most of our big competition out there. For those of you that are on the lower end where we're competing with, Netgear and stuff like that, our Plus Pack licensing easily competes with those. I think it's somewhere around $10, $12 a year per device for that. And of course, I think we're the only guys left that offer a free tier that doesn't have restrictions to like only 5 or 10 devices, where ours is unlimited for you. So that's it as far as today's presentation goes. Again, if you have questions, that question and answer interface, go ahead and send them in. Just to let you know, we do have our own YouTube channel. It is called Zyxel America channel. And most of our webinars are recorded and are then uploaded there. So if you've missed a webinar or had to step away, you can always catch it a day or two later on our YouTube. And most of our webinars, we do these once a month or once every other month. So you can always go back. If we haven't uploaded the most recent version, you can watch a previous version on our YouTube page. We also have some best practices videos on there. We have video case studies on there. Some product introduction videos, so lots of stuff on there. And then we are on LinkedIn if you want to connect with us. We are Zyxel US channel. Zyxel is a huge multinational company. So there's lots of different Zyxels that you'll find on LinkedIn and YouTube. So that's why I wanted to point out the names that we use here in North America so you can find us directly. I also do highly suggest that you check out our user forums, forum.zyxel.com. It's a place for you to talk to other Zyxel users and installers. But more importantly, it is monitored by our R&D and our product management team. So they will often wade in and answer questions that get posted in there. It's also usually the first place that you'll find release notes, security bulletins, and things like that. So it's worthwhile, even if you have no interest in talking to other Zyxel users, it's a good place to keep an eye on so you see what's going on, in case there's been a security hazard or something like that. Okay, I haven't got any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. If you do have questions that pop up later, you can always email me directly. It's seanr@zyxel.com, or you just reach out to your salesperson, Andy, David, Jacob, and they'll either get you the answer or they'll put you in touch with me or Try or whoever it needs to be to get you an answer to your question. But thank you for turning out, guys. I appreciate it and hope to see you at one of my future webinars.